Thank you, Juan Jose. And now I'll welcome Matteo for his presentation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Jose. And thank you, Irene, in general, for giving me the opportunity to share our experience and our work related to the energy security assessment. So I will share my screen. Let me know if you can see it, please. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Yes.
I will share full screen. Again, thank you, Irina, and also thank everyone who is participating in the meeting, in the session. First of all, I want to spend a couple of words regarding who we are. RSE, Ricerca sul Sistema Energetico, is an Italian company which is indirectly controlled by the Ministry of Economy and Finance through its sole shareholder, that is GSE SPA, which in turn is the company that manages the electricity sector in Italy. It performs research activities related to the energy sector by executing projects at both national and European level, with the final scope to basically support the policymakers as well as the association of companies and citizens. It is split into 4 main departments, and I belong to the energy system development, which is active in long-term analysis of the energy system, emphasizing some aspects such as infrastructure management, the energy efficiency development, and strategic planning. Related to this last activity, I'm part of the scenarios and system analysis group, which provide the governance of the Italian energy system with decarbonization scenarios and also the related impact assessments. My group in 2023 started a new activity with the final goal to integrate the scenario analysis with the impact assessment on the energy security topic. The first thing we did in our work was to review the literature, trying to capture, let's say, a main definition, a comprehensive definition regarding the energy security concept. The first definition we came across into was the one provided by the OECD. That is that the energy security is the continuous availability of energy in varied form, sufficient quantities at reasonable prices. But then we found out that other authors associated with the energy security other dimensions that you can see here listed in the slide, and that, let's say, quickly they all relate to aspects that should be always associated to energy security, and that should be peculiar characteristic of a system that is secure, that is to the ability to provide energy at adequate quantities and prices in an interconnected energy system, which is also able to withstand let's say, internal, external shocks and risks, both in the short and long term. And therefore, we end up to, let's say, a more comprehensive definition that is here written in the slide, that is the ability to ensure energy systems that allows the functioning of the economy and also the physical availability of the resources, despite internal and external shocks and risks, while achieving decarbonization goals. So, the second part of our work was related to basically define a preliminary first methodology in order to integrate the scenario analysis with the energy security assessment. The methodology consists in the calculation of 16 different parameters and indicators that have the goal to assess the energy system under different perspectives. The first one is, let's say, from a technical point of view, that is understand and assess the technological and infrastructural adequacy of the system. Then we have the socioeconomic indicators, and finally the, let's say, geopolitical indicators that summarize the external risk exposure. Also, each one of, let's say, of this group of indicators is declined from, let's say, a general point of view and specifically to assess the situation for the electricity and the gas market. The premise here is that we develop energy scenarios for Italy via an energy model, which is the time RSE energy model. And not all the indicators and parameters can be calculated considering the scenario projections since, let's say, because of two main reasons. The first is that, let's say, structurally, the energy model has some limitations, so it's not able to provide data that is also parameter key variable or indicator key variable. And the second is that it might be that one of the parameters key variable is imposed exogenously as a constraint in the energy model. The scenario we are taking into consideration in the report is the National Energy and Climate Plan updated in 2023, the draft version. And basically, this scenario is part of a strategic document that is provided to the European Commission by the member countries and describe the evolution of the Italian energy sector, considering the energy and decarbonization policies suggested and implemented by the government with the ultimate goal of achieving the decarbonization targets suggested by the European Commission. So, diving into the technical indicators, the first one is the calculation of the energy mix diversification, that is the share, the contribution of each energy source over the gross available energy, and this data can be found in net energy balance provided by Eurostat. And also, I forgot to say that in this table you can see the possibility to apply the indicators and parameters to our scenario projections. Then we have the calculation of the energy efficiency, that is the final energy to gross energy consumption ratio. Regarding the electricity sector, we have the capacity of satisfying the power demand, so the summation of domestic generation and import capacity over the grid peak demand. Then we have the concentration, the plant's capacity concentration, that is the ratio between the bigger plants and the total capacity installed. The technological diversification of the power plants, so the share and the contribution of each type of power plants over the total installed capacity or generation. The geographical concentration of the plants across the national territory. And regarding the gas market, we calculated the capacity of satisfying the gas demand, which is basically the third parameter declined for the gas market, and so also the gas storage capacity, not only in terms of installed capacity of the facilities, but also the, let's say, the ability of fill them up before the winter season. Regarding the socioeconomic indicators, the first one is the energy intensity, that is the gross inland consumption to GDP. And then we have also the share of income spent by households for energy uses, especially considering housing and transport. And the prices of energy bills here referred as gas and electricity retail prices, both for firms and households, because we found out basically that usually higher prices are a symptom of a low level of energy security. And finally, let's say the geopolitical indicators, that is the energy dependence, so the contribution of the net energy imports to the gross available energy, as well as the same is basically calculated for the electricity and the gas, and also for the gas is calculated the share of each foreign supplier to the import total. So now I will show you the results, starting from the first parameter. Here in the second figure, you can see that considering Italy and the data provided by Eurostat in the net energy balance, historically, Italy has an energy sector in which the fossil fuels play a predominant role, especially considering the natural gas and oil. while, for example, coal is being phased out due to environmental reasons, with its share decreasing from 8% down to 5% in 2022, and renewable energy sources are gaining ground with a contribution of 18% in 2022. Well, if we compare this with the European average, we find out that actually European average is more diversified, not only because coal has an higher share, but also because there is an additional source of energy that is nuclear. Scenario projection depict a total different context in which there is a shift towards renewables, especially due to the photovoltaic and wind deployment. And there is, in any case, an important contribution, again, by natural gas that is used in our projection for mainly for residential and industrial end uses, but also the oil is used for in the transport and especially in heavy freight transport. Also, you cannot see this in the second figure, but it's important to highlight that, let's say, the projection depict consistent energy savings with a negative variation of 17 percentage point from 2022 to 2030. The second parameter relates to the energy efficiency. And here there is a general trend, both considering the historical data and the projections, a positive trend in which energy efficiency improve. And this is due to different, let's say, dynamics and factors. Definitely the efficiency improvement in the energy conversion technologies, then the electrification, so the growth in the use of the electric appliances in the final end uses, and also the tertiarization of the economies that therefore is based on less intensive economic activities. We also can see from the third figure that the level of efficiency in Italy are a bit higher, a bit better with respect to the European average. And regarding the scenario projections, there is a strong improvement until 2030, while from 2030 to 2040, there is an improvement, but at a slower pace, let's say. In the next slide, then, considering the historical data in the table 4, you can see that the sum of the power generation capacity and the import capacity over the grid peak demand is always more than 2. So even excluding also the imports of the import capacity and non-dispatchable renewable energy sources, the generation capacity is higher than the peak demand, with the ratio amounting to 1.5. So this is a green flag for Italy. Regarding the 4 parameter, the capacity concentration of the power plants, basically in Italy there are only 6 thermoelectric plants with a capacity higher than 1 gigawatt, and these make up circa the 8% of the total power generation capacity. So even comparing with other countries, these percentages, other European countries, this percentage is relatively low and has also remained constant over the past decade, and is expected to, let's say, improve because usually the deployment of renewable energy sources are more, let's say, is more distributed than concentrated. Then regarding the technology diversification, also here, let's say the trend is similar to what depicted in the first indicator. That is, historically in the electricity sector, the thermoelectric generation is predominant, amounting to 70% in 2022. And also hydroelectric is relevant, but strongly affected by seasonal and environmental conditions. And even if European mix is more diversified because of, especially because of the presence of nuclear, which is an additional energy source with respect to the Italian context, we can see that scenario projections see a shift towards mainly solar, but also wind. In the next slide, there is also the fifth figure showing the power generation to demand ratio calculated for each zone in the Italian electricity market. And here we find that even if the generation of electricity is concentrated in the northern part of Italy, let's say that in the north you demand more than what is generated, and the contrary in the south. And this unfortunately imply the fact that in the market there is the formation of two main zones, one of export from the south to the north, of course, one of import, with a considerable delta in prices. So this is one of, let's say, the red flag for the energy security. Then we have regarding the gas market, the technical capacity of satisfying the gas demand. Here, considering the historical data in the sixth figure, you can see that there has been an improvement in the ratio in the last few years, thanks to the commissioning of a new pipeline called TAP in Puglia, which enables the import from the Caucasus regions, especially from Azerbaijan, and also the commissioning of new LNG terminal in Tuscany, in Piombino, and in Ravenna, in Emilia-Romagna. This one in Ravenna should open, if I remember correctly, at the beginning of 2025, so in a few months. Regarding the gas storage capacity, Italy has the second largest gas storage capacity in Europe and can cover, in terms of volume of gas demanded, circa 1/4 of the annual demand. And even more important is that in 2023, a record level of gas storage facilities fulfillment were achieved with a 99%. And this is due to two main factors. The first one is that, Italy, especially November and October, the last few November and October were milder with respect to the past. And also there is a political effort to fill up the facilities. Because of the geopolitical events that occurred in 2022 and shake the international markets. Regarding the energy intensity, we can see that historically there has been an improvement in the past decade, and this tendency is also confirmed in the scenario projections. However, what is noted in the historical data with respect to the European average is that let's say that European average is catching up with respect to Italy, but not because of, let's say, dynamics related to the energy sector, but more related to denominator, so to the GDP, because basically in average European countries grow faster than Italy. Therefore, we can see this catch-up dynamic. And also, regarding the scenario projection, there is a consistent improvement from 2022 and 2030, but not in the other decade from 2030 to 2040, because, let's say, at the same level of economic activity, of economic growth, achieving savings, so higher efficiency intensity is more difficult over time. Regarding the prices, here is another red flag because historical data show that gas price in Italy, as you can see in the fifth and the sixth table, retail gas price for household and firms in Italy has always been a bit higher than the European average. But this price peaked and the delta widened after 2021 because Italy, as we will see later, Italian gas system is and was basically reliant on the Russian supplies. Also, we saw in the previous indicators that the electricity sector in Italy is basically based on thermoelectric and gas plants. Therefore, there is a strong correlation between the power and the electricity, and the gas retail price. And the gap versus the European average is even higher, since the European generation mix is more diversified with a higher contribution provided by coal and the presence of the nuclear. In 2023, the price decreased because let's say the international benchmark stabilized, and also government start to implement countermeasures. For what regard the level of, let's say, the share of income of the households that is dedicated to cover energy expenses, especially in housing and transport, there was a positive tendency in the past decade, with a decrease from 10% to 8%, but then the situation dramatically worsened after 2022. For what regard, let's say, the geopolitical indicators, we know in terms of energy dependence that, I mean, Italy is a country that is poor in reserves and raw materials. Therefore, especially in a context in which the energy sector is based on fossil fuel, is dependent on foreign supplies. We can see this from the 8th figure, in which the import to gross available energy ratio amounted to 80% in 2010, steadily improved until 2021, but then increased again in 2022. Right now, let's say the level are still the one recorded in 2010, basically. While scenario data show a consistent improvement because of two main reasons. The first one is that renewable energy sources diffuse and penetrate. And also there is an improvement on energy intensity and efficiency, which in turn means higher savings and therefore lower need for fossil fuels. Regarding the imports over the total electricity supply, Italy is the largest net importer of electricity in the European Union, despite, as we saw in the third indicator, having an excess internal generation capacity. So the imports picked up to 17% in 2023, but this is not because of technical condition, but because of purely economic condition, because Italy mainly imports from neighboring countries like France, which can produce share of their electricity with nuclear power, and so the final price is cheaper. Scenario projection show an improvement always because of the electrical renewables deployment, but still the contribution of the import is relevant and equal to 10% in 2030. Finally, we have the last two parameters related to the imports over the total gas available. So, as we said, Italy is a country poor in gas reserves, both offshore and onshore. Here, national production was quite relevant at the beginning of the century, but then dramatically declined to 3 million tons of oil equivalent in 2021. And this is from, let's say, a technical reason and a legal reason, let's say, because of the depletion of the existing fields, but most of all because the enactment of some regulation that had the goal to, let's say, protect the environment. So after the international turmoil in 2022, the government tried to change the strategy, aiming to boost the national production, especially offshore and especially in the Adriatic and Mediterranean Sea. However, as you can see in the 8th figure, in terms of absolute numbers, the national production is not expected to provide a critical contribution. And finally, what we can say about the scenario projections is that Italy still remains a net importer of gas, of course, but due to the improvement in efficiency and intensity, the gas demanded is always less by the time goes by. Therefore, there is an improvement, at least in absolute numbers. For what regard the import diversification between gas foreign suppliers, another red flag, since nearly half of the gas available was supplied by Russia, circa 40 to 45% in the last decade. The other half was provided from Northern African countries like Libya and Algeria, and also from North Europe with Norway. In 2022, since 2022, there has been a shift with the substitution of the Russian supplies with gas supply from Algeria and Azerbaijan mainly, but also the opening with the opening of new LNG GNL terminals. Also, the GNL from US and Qatar started to, let's say, to play a relevant role. And Algeria is now the main supplier with a 32% share. The last slide here is related to the main findings. In our view, what are the main drivers for the energy security improvement? First of all, of course, promoting the diversification of the energy sources so as to reduce the potential shocks and potential risks arising from certain commodity supply disruption or its price increase. Linked to this first point, especially in the context of Italy with a good solar irradiation with respect to other European countries and a very long coastline, since it is a peninsula, the deployment of renewables, especially wind and photovoltaic. And this needs to be coupled with grid enhancement, so the accumulation of storage systems or demand response devices, so as to tackle overgeneration and instability, and also to maintain a strategic capacity of dispatchable plants, like, for example, could be the most efficient thermoelectric plants. This would allow to reduce dependence and also probably would have a beneficial effect in terms of energy bills for both households and firms. Then endorsing the diffusion of efficient energy consumption technologies. This would allow to electrify the end uses and therefore exploit the electric renewables, and also improve both energy efficiency and intensity, leading finally to energy savings. Strengthening the infrastructure, so the transport lines, especially from south to north, and guarantee a share of distributed generation capacity to be increased near the major consumption centers in order to avoid and solve the zonal market distortions that we saw before. And finally, regarding the import of fossil fuel, the diversification of the routes, and if possible, and as much as possible, to stimulate national production. So all these drivers are explicitly, let's say, cited in the National Energy and Climate Plan document. In fact, we can find some public schemes in terms of incentives for agrivoltaics, biomethane, wind and photovoltaic, and also the promotion of long-term PPAs to make the sale of electricity generated with the renewables be, let's say, more diffused. Then we have public investment plans for the national power grid to expand the capacity from south to north, connection of the islands, but also there are some decrees suggesting the deployment of the renewables basing on the regions. Then we have the strengthening of gas pipelines. Also here, the Linea Adriatica connecting the south to the north, the expansion of the TAP, and also the commissioning of, for example, the Poseidon pipeline that should link South Italy with the southern East Mediterranean gas fields, so as to make it like a gas hub for the rest of Europe. And then we have incentives for the promotion of energy efficiency, both in the residential sector through the building renovation, also for the tertiary sector, and for sectors that are traditionally difficult to decarbonize, like industry. Finally, support for the diffusion of energy communities, in which, therefore, the energy is self-produced and self-consumed. Then, as we saw before, the intention by the government to diversify as much as possible the gas suppliers, also recurring to LNG imports, and finally providing incentives for the diffusion of electric vehicles, so to let's say electrify the transport sector, and also strengthening the related infrastructure. So there are let's say explicit targets in terms of increasing, for example, the number of charging points. Here I finish my presentation. Here are key discussion points that I don't know, Angela, if you want to read them. I will stop sharing my screen. And also, if you have any question, please ask.